Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of FPL Affairs, the podcast that discusses our 9-month-long love affair with FPL, including the ins and outs that keep us awake at night. In this latest video, we focused on navigating fixture congestion, starting with midweek round of 14. How will this affect our transfer plans going into the festive period? And we also look at our individual team plans for game week 13. Let's get cracking.
And there's Mo Salah. There goes Haaland. He's on his way again. He's hungry. He's scored. Ice cold precision from Palmer. Kayo Saka. That is a diamond of a goal.
Okay, welcome to the second video of Game Week 13 with me, Matt, aka The Veteran, and Jack the Master. How have you been since we recorded all of 5 minutes ago?
Absolutely fantastic, mate. Yeah, couldn't be better. What a 5 minutes.
I know.
Just glad we're not going to go over my red arrow again.
Well, I was thinking about that. But maybe we'll revisit that at the end when we actually go on to our current thoughts for the next game week. Right, let's get cracking. Right, okay, the main topic for this video really is navigating the fixture congestion with the forthcoming festive period, with what may catch people out or may not is simply the timing of when game week 14 is in comparison to game week 13. So let's take a look. Jack, I chose this graphic because I thought it was quite humorous, this picture, as it showed traffic congestion and the colours are often colours that are seen on fixture tickers.
They are, yeah.
So that's why I kind of chose this one.
That looks like largely my morning commute to work.
And there's one on this traffic board game thing I've got, but anyway, I'm not going to get sidetracked with this. So yeah, I did initially put down game week 13 to 15 really because of the turnaround with the midweek game, but it really goes beyond game week 15, which we'll look at on the next slide. So on this slide, to not take credit for this, I picked up from Fantasy Football Hub's Ben Crellin, cropped up little bits of the schedule of the show in the next 6 weeks. So starting with game week 12 through till the start of January, which has game week 20. And for those of you looking at the screen, in dark green is the Premier League fixtures. In the different shades of blue in the others, there's the European fixtures. That's showing up this week, as well as the week starting December the 10th, and December the 17th has got the quarterfinals of the EFL Cup. But with a giant red arrow, horizontal. I should have really done it grey, really, but then I thought that was a bit, clashed. And I've circled where we are at the moment. 3-day turnaround between deadline dates for game week 13 and game week 14.
I think looking at this straight away, similar to teams that play in the Premier League, it's not season defining, the Christmas period, but if you can get it right, it'll really fly you up the ranks. There's a lot of decisions to be made in a short period of time. So if you've got November the 30th as your start point, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 deadlines in December. If you include the November the 30th one, 7. So 7 transfers, 7 decisions, captaincy decisions, transfer decisions, there's so many different ways you can go in 7 deadlines.
Yeah.
So I would definitely suggest plan. I'd say plan. If you haven't planned, there are plenty of great websites out there. There's one on FPL Hub. I like to use Live FPL. What do you use? FPL Plan.
I've used Plan FPL. Yeah,
Plan FPL. Yeah.
I've used that. I use that, and I've used the Hub one before.
FPL
Sometimes
Teams, another one. There's quite a lot out there. I would suggest planning. And then, obviously, in our previous video from 10 minutes ago, we spoke about suspensions of players. They're very much going to come into play. There's players that are on 2 yellow cards that will be suspended by the time we get to the end of this. If that makes sense. They'll pick up 3 in that period of time. People come from nowhere normally during this Christmas period and end up with a suspension. And I would be very, very careful, especially at the beginning of December, whether the transfers that you're thinking about making are necessary or if they're luxury moves and you'd be better off rolling a transfer and saving it, because 3 things are definitely going to happen during this period of time. One is player rotation. So if you have 11 players in your team that start all of these game weeks, you'll be in a very, very small minority. 2, suspensions. So like I said, make sure you have a good bench. And 3, injuries. So again, you're doing a Mbermo to a Matoma right now may be a great option. But if you've got an Mbermo who's going to play 90 minutes and he's going to start, and he's going to be one of those players that's likely to start every single one of these fixtures if he's fit, I would just leave him in there, roll the transfer, and wait for somebody else to get injured, or wait for somebody. If you've got Jackson, he won't make it through this fixture schedule without getting another yellow card. If you've got Nuri, he won't make it either. There's a chance that Palmer, Hall, Dean, Rogers, all of these players that we spoke about in our last video on suspensions are all going to be problems. Now, whether you transfer them out is one thing, or whether you use a transfer to upgrade a bench option for that 1 week so that it's not that much of a loss benching a Jackson or benching a Palmer if he gets suspended. So, Matt calls it my famous saying, just roll where you can. If you don't make luxury moves, now's not the time. In my experience of this busy Christmas period, if you go down it, there are 3 days between 13 and 14, 4 between 14 and 15. Then there's obviously midweek games in the Cup, of which Liverpool, not that Cup, sorry. Then there's European games. 4 days after that, you've got Premier League. 3 days after that, you've got the quarterfinals, of which Liverpool are in there. Expect rotation.
Brentford.
Newcastle, Brentford. So there's assets. We've all got Liverpool, Brentford, and Newcastle assets.
I think actually when the last round of the League Cup was done, that a point was made on how it was the first time in however many years that all of the last 8 were Premier League clubs. Where the last 8 was made up entirely of Premier League clubs.
Yeah.
Normally some lower leagues get to the quarterfinals. Depending on the draw, you might get one in a semi-final. But yeah, it was the first time in quite a while, I think it was, that the last 8 were all Premier League. So there'll be a lot of popular players playing.
Well, it's also the teams, isn't it? If you, even Southampton, budget options such as a Dibbling and a Harwood Bellis, who if something were to go wrong, you'd play. You happily is the wrong word, but you'd be okay starting a Harwood Bellis if you had to. If he picks up a knock, or if he's played in that quarterfinal, which, as a Southampton fan, I'd bet that to happen, then he might get rotated out. A lot of people have Liverpool assets. A lot of teams have Burmo and Vissel, such as yourself, Matt. Again, there's Newcastle assets, so Hall, Isak. So there's a lot of popular FPL players playing in that midweek round of fixtures. And where, like you said, although Southampton are probably the exception, where it's all for Premier League teams are likely to play their best 11s.
Once you get to the finals, they're certainly getting there, aren't they?
Yeah. And then Bosch, 4 days into game week 17, 5 days into game week 18, then 3 days into game week 19, followed by another 3 or 4 days into game week 20. So very busy, and I would try and just roll where you can. Right, for example, this week I could happily do Strand Larsen to João Pedro. He's got Southampton at home. It's a really easy fixture. Strand Larsen's obviously been struggling to pick up returns recently. It's a really simple move, really easy. But I just feel like right now, looking at the fixture ticker and the dates that are coming up for a really busy Christmas period, and João Pedro, in my opinion, is likely to play. How many games is there? 8 or 9 games in there. He's probably going to be benched for at least one of them, I reckon, and rested. Just being back from injury. Chances are it might be game week 14. So just again, bear that in mind. I'll just bear that in mind and just roll transfers where you can. I'm not suggesting Strand Larsen will play all of them either, but I'm just saying don't want to necessarily make a transfer where you're going out of the frying pan into the fire.
Yeah. I did have a point in my head, and obviously it's gone now what I was going to say with these fixtures, but it does put into context, really, to take a step back and evaluate rather than just going, transfer who's got a nice fixture, this, that, by taking into account what we had in the last video of the bookings, and then also looking into the closeness of these fixtures. And yes, João Pedro's like the luxury one in that so many people are bringing in, which, and from his points in the last couple of games, is valid reasoning, but his injury concerns and how close these fixtures are together is how much of that is he going to be rotated for.
Definitely. And again, this is where planning comes into it. If you start planning, then plan for as many sort of outcomes as you can find. If you downgrade Chris Wood to João Pedro, then upgrade a bench option so that if João Pedro was to be fully rested, you'd have somebody half decent coming off the bench for him. If you've got a bench of Valfas, Harwood Bellis, Tyler Dibbling and Fabianski, I would not look at ways of improving your bench, but be aware that it's going to be needed. And if you would you do Burmo to Matoma this week, and then next week all of a sudden an injury comes in, and you're having to play Tyler Dibbling, who's in game week 14, for example, got Chelsea, and you've got to play him away at Stamford Bridge, at home to Chelsea. Would you rather have saved that transfer and have a bit of money to upgrade somebody, so in order to avoid that fixture? I would. rather than have, I don't know, Chris Wood down to João Pedro or Jimenez down to João Pedro or Strand Larson to João Pedro. I wouldn't. I'd rather
Well,
have the transfer.
we've said as well about the various different fixture planners that you can find out there that are free, and you can get other ones which you pay for subscription to get additional features. But the one I've used for free, Plan FPL, you can create up to 5 different transfer plans week by week, and then you can compare those side by side about how your team changes with those, and it gives you about the fixture difficulty, how many players you've got that have got easier fixtures compared to harder ones, and so on. But with that in mind, and with the yellow cards we spoke about, and with the transfers you bring in, certainly to look for players that are going to be getting as many minutes as possible and are least susceptible to rotation. Because even if they are rotated out for a game, for a game's rest, then they'll be okay to see out the rest. But ones that are fixture rotation risks anyway, wouldn't recommend bringing those in over this festive period.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's quite a few players like what's his name? Oh, I was talking about him earlier, but like Man United, for example, if you fancy bringing in a Garnacho, or you fancy bringing in a Rashford because he started up top, or a Mazraoui, or any of their team really. Obviously, on the last video, we spoke about not knowing how they're going to set up and what their best 11 is, but also they've got so many options, Man United, in so many positions. You could easily see a Dallo being rested and then playing Mazraoui at right back with Luke Shaw at left back, or rotation up front in the 3 between an Ahmad, a Garnacho, and a Rashford and a Højlund. So, same with Liverpool. If you're a Luis Diaz owner, be aware that Gakpo's going to start probably at least 3 of these games. Same with who else is there? Like Martinelli. If you're thinking about bringing in Martinelli at Arsenal, I doubt he's going to start all of them. Trossard's there, so just little things like that. Just be aware going into it that there's big chance for rotation.
Yeah, I think really you need a squad full of 15 playing players, so that if any of those get suspended, you've got bench cover and you don't need to utilise transfers.
Well, I mean, I was thinking about Chelsea today and Madueke, and he's a nice budget option and a nice way into the Chelsea midfield, but he's not going to start every single one of those games. Neither is Pedro Neto. Neither is like Sancho. I'm not sure if he's fit or what's gone on there. But there just is going to be rotation everywhere. And so players like Palmer just become that much more premium because Bukayo Saka is going to start all of those games. Erling Haaland's going to start all of those games. Mo Salah's going to start all of those games. Palmer's going to start all of those games. Van Dijk's going to start all of those games. So that they're premiums for a reason, the premium players. They're trying to duck and dive and penny pinch and find budget ways into good teams like a Madueke or like a Gakpo or a Diaz are going to result in a couple of appearances off the bench. So I would advise against that at this busy Christmas period.
So I think in summary of our waffle on this so far, the key points really are, and I'll start with your favourite, roll where possible, so that if you suddenly get an influx of bookings and injuries in one particular game week, you've got ways out to cover it. Try to get your squad full of 15 playing players that are ideally 90-minute men that even in congested periods are still going to play every game if they are physically fit or not banned. Any players I think you bring in, be mindful of that yellow card list, because you don't want to
Yeah.
bring in a player on a transfer that suddenly a week later gets suspended for picking up a fifth yellow or fourth and fifth yellows in back-to-back games. Really, and plan, have different options. So you may have a route you think I'm thinking of getting this player, then that player, then that player, and then maybe something happens to prevent one, then already have in your mind you, this is coming from someone that's probably addicted to FPL that probably has about 10 different plans anyway. But just
Yeah, but it's not a bad time to have a
yeah,
lot of plans. It's not a bad time to have 5 or 6 different ways you can go, because things will change and you will
yeah,
need to adapt. And although plans are great, and although we could all sit here right now and say, right, I'm going to make this move, then this move, then this move, and then in game week 18, this is going to be my team. Chances are very
it won't.
much so that it won't be, because things will crop up between now and then. So although I'm saying plan, be aware. Don't plan it to the definitive minutiae. Be
Yeah,
aware that you might have to deviate from that plan. And if you do want to bring in Jackson now, that's fine. But be aware that, for example, he may get booked in the next game and he may not start that game against Southampton. And if
or
it is
drop.
the game against Southampton, I know what you're going to say, yeah. But
Yeah,
if it is the game against Southampton that you want him for, don't bring him in this week. See if he's going to be available for it, and then bring him in the following week.
yeah. Jack knows what I was going to say. This is something what I saw on FPL Harry in a video the other day. Him being an avid Chelsea fan, is he has a theory about Jackson and how he's been doing so much better this season compared to last season. But with this congested period coming up, he will need a rest and at some point. And with game week 14 being a midweek game and it's against Southampton, FPL Harry's theory is that his rest will be for that game because it's midweek. And he would also not be surprised if he was booked. He deliberately gets himself booked against Villa in game week 13 so that his suspended game would be one that they'd ideally want to rest him for anyway. So the sort of kill birds with one stone, rather than him being rested for game week 14 and then in game week 15 he plays and gets booked and then he's suspended for game week 16. So yeah, that's his theory, and having seen that
My
also contributed to me not
my
getting Jackson in for game week 12.
I do have one rebuttal to that plan, and I do think it. I'm not suggesting FPL Harry's wrong. He knows far more than I do. He's a very good fantasy football player. But two things. One, as a centre forward, the last thing you'd want to do is miss that Southampton game. It'd be
Oh,
the
very
last.
true.
It'd be the last game you'd want to miss.
It
It
would
would
come
be.
from it would come from the powers that be.
Yeah, it wouldn't be his call if that was the case, because he would be. That would be the game he'd be looking forward to the most.
Mm,
The other thing is that their fixture run afterwards is very favourable.
mm.
So it's not like it's Southampton and then it's City and then it's United and then it's
Right.
Arsenal and then it's like, do you know what I mean?
Have they got
It's
have they got Tottenham? Have they got Tottenham in game week 15?
mm,
I've got a funny feeling that they've got that after Southampton, they've got a tricky game, and then um,
I Again, though, a Tottenham defence, I know we just watched him keep a clean sheet against City at the Etihad. But again, the Tottenham defence is not a defence that would scare a Nick Jackson. He wouldn't look at that game and go, oh, that's going to be a tough one for me. I'm pretty
Well,
sure he scored plenty there last year, actually. Wasn't it like a goal fest when they played there last year?
It was the
Like a 4-3.
4-4. It was the 4-4 because Tottenham got 2 players sent off and Jackson got a hat trick.
That's right. Exactly. So and that's my point. My point is that as a centre forward, and I don't know Nick Jackson, but to look at him, he looks like he backs himself. I wouldn't be, as a centre forward, be looking at that game week against Southampton and being like, oh well, I guess I'll just miss that one. If I was Nick Jackson, I'd be like, no, I don't want to get booked against Villa. If anything, I'm going to keep my nose as clean as I can in that game because I desperately want to play that Villa game, that Southampton game, desperately. So I see his point, and he's obviously a Chelsea fan and far more qualified to talk on it than I am as a Southampton fan. But if I'm Nick Jackson, I am going to be, I am about to play the most polite game of football I've ever played against Villa, purely so I'm a selection, potentially selected to go and play against Southampton in the midweek.
Well, it does.
He has been protected as well so far this season. Sorry to interrupt you. He hasn't played any midweek games because Nkunku has started pretty much all the midweek games. And FPL Harry would probably look at that and go, well, that trend would continue. And he would purposely miss the Southampton game and Nkunku would start and they treat it like it's a Europa League game.
Yeah.
Or a Conference League game. I don't know what they're in, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And I just don't see it. If I'm Nick Jackson, I'm like, right, get me to that Southampton game. No, I just can't see him doing it.
I remember last season, this going on about the player mentality and motivation in relation to bookings and so on, is Bruno Guimaraes of Newcastle got, I think he got to 9 yellow cards.
Yeah.
Quite quickly, and so he was one game away before getting a two match suspension, and I can't remember what the threshold is. Maybe it's like at game week 19 or game week 20, the 5 yellow card before a suspension is extended to 10.
It's 19. It's halfway through a season. Yeah. So when your team has played 19 games. So
he picked one up, and then I think the next jump is is it game week 30 or 31 or something when it jumps from 10 to 15. But anyway, basically, Eddie Howe recalled having a word with him because Newcastle had loads of midfield injuries, and he was just, we cannot afford to miss you for 2, have you suspended, and Bruno was very much no, it's fine, I won't get booked, not a problem, won't do it. And every Newcastle fan, and Eddie Howe admitted as well in a sort of post-season review of the season, is that Bruno can say that, but no, he will get booked. He went 11, 12 matches, not a single booking. He was arguably better, I think, performance-wise, because he was a lot more composed, less rash tackles. And then it got to the threshold where the yellow card tally went from 10 to 15. And the match after that changed, he got booked. So he missed. He missed
suspensions. Suspensions are funny ones because you can look at them and you can go, I'm not bringing in Nate Nuri at the moment because he's on 4 yellow cards. And I'm not bringing in Nick Jackson at the moment because he's on 4 yellow cards. And they could go 5 or 6 games without getting that 5th yellow card, score plenty of goals or get plenty of clean sheets and get plenty of points. And you're annoyed at yourself that you didn't take the risk. But at the end of the day, it is a risk. And it depends on you as an FPL manager, and who and what you're like, if you're going to bring in Nick Jackson for this week against Villa and he gets booked and he gets suspended for that Southampton game, if you're going to react to that as a bit like, well, I took the risk and it didn't pay off, oh, well, I'll have him for his nice run, clear of
After.
any threat of suspension afterwards, then
Mm.
fine. If you're not, and you're the type of manager that's going to be fuming and really annoyed and frustrated, then just don't do it. Don't put yourself through it. At the end of the day, it's up to you what you put yourself through in this game. And if you're the type that's going to react badly to it, then just wait. Because if he doesn't get booked against Villa, I'll definitely look to bring him in. Because for me, if he does play the Southampton game, if it was me and I was Nick Jackson, I'd get booked in the Southampton game, and then I'd just miss the Spurs game and enjoy the lovely run of fixtures that I've got after that. And I've got the Southampton game. I've scored a brace or a hat trick because let's face it, Southampton are rubbish. And then I'll just put my feet up for the Spurs game, and then I'll carry on, come back fresh and fit, ready to go, and I'll have every right to play every game after that because I've had a rest, and just make it rain goals in these nice fixtures that I've got coming up. That's what I would do if I was Nick Jackson.
Yeah.
But we've spoken a lot about Nick Jackson now.
Well, shall we look at our current transfer plans for game week 13? Our ins and our outs. I can't remember who's busting. I've got up first. I think yours again, as normal, possibly.
Let's find out. Let's spin the wheel.
Yeah.
It's me.
Yeah. So I put it in on Hub and got them to optimize the team how it is, and squashed up on the bench, nice and cozy. Valdemarson, Smith Rowe, Mikolenko, and Fass. So
I'm
yeah,
probably going to start Smith Rowe over Rodgers.
No,
So
top.
I am looking to roll this week. I am. Anybody that watched the last video, I said at the beginning that I listened to me at work last week and thought I was talking a lot of sense because I forgot I was listening to me, and then proceeded to ignore all of my own advice and carry on and go a different route.
And it didn't work. You got a red
and
arrow.
it didn't work. Got a red arrow.
So lesson learned, viewers, is listen to Jack.
No, it's not. It's
follow
not.
what he says rather than going against it.
No, it's not. That's not where I was going with it. It's a trust your gut sort of thing. You can the problem with that's the other thing with this fixture congestion is decisions are going to be quick. There's going to be price rises. There's going to be early transfers made. There's going to be you're not going to have long to think and analyse. It's going to be off the cuff. It's going to be a lot of reactive transfers as opposed to proactive transfers. Excuse me, because a lot of them are going to be based on things that are out of your control. Last week, I came on the pod and spoke about a theory that I had that I thought about, and then I ended up thinking it into oblivion, overthinking it, and then going against it when really I should have just trusted my initial decision. This week, however, I've just spoke about roll where you can, but the temptation to do Strand Larsen to João Pedro is about as strong as it gets. And I know you're thinking about bringing him in as well. However, it's one of those things where, yes, he's got a good fixture, and yes, he's coming off the back of a good couple of weeks football-wise, FPL-wise, but is it a necessary move? I don't think it is. And if Haaland were to score a brace at Anfield, or even just one goal, then my week would most likely be a positive one, as long as Saka doesn't score a hat trick, and I've got 2 free transfers. I'm looking at bringing Saka in. I want triple Arsenal. I'm looking at getting some money from somewhere. The obvious route is to downgrade the frustrating Norwegian, which would be so easy. Honestly, I get why everybody does it. I mean, I could just make it rain after. I could go Wolf of Wall Street and just spend. I'd just sell Haaland. Imagine if I did Haaland to João Pedro, how much money I'd have. Oh my. But I've got 1 free transfer. So if I do Haaland down to João Pedro, I'm not going to take a hit to do anything, because I think that's madness. So I just sit there with loads of money in the bank, wait until next week, that's no fun. There's no point downgrading Haaland and then not spending the money.
Having
The other
9
thing is,
million in the bank.
yeah, just sat there for a week, and then like you did with Isak. Obviously, you benefited from the Salah move, but if I'd have done Haaland to Isak last week on its own, it'd have been a waste of time. So I need to get Mbermo to Saka, and I was looking at it earlier, and I need to make 2 other transfers elsewhere in order to do that.
Because he's
And without
10.1, 10.2.
Without taking out Gabriel, or without tanking Chris Wood to a Jettison, I need to make 2 transfers as well as the Mbermo to Saka one. So I'm just going to roll this week, long story short, and then assess next week.
Because I'm just
But
looking at your
there are
team.
so many other things I could do. So many other things. Like, I could even afford. I don't know how much I got in the bank. Let me check, actually. I'm pretty sure it's like 0.6 million, 0.8 million, something like that. Hang on, please hold the line, everybody.
Well, which
Apologies.
kind of means while you're finding that, I was just saying, looking at Jack's team, about whereabouts you could sort of pinch little bits of money here and there to get Mbermo up to Saka. And really, it's sort of Aït-Nouri you don't really want to take out with his fixtures coming up. Smith Rowe, possibly.
Yeah,
Wood,
I need.
possibly. Wood
Yeah, well,
after,
Wood's
but that would be
Woods.
after the
Yeah,
Ipswich
so
game.
yeah, so I'm leaving Chris Wood this week, definitely, which is why I never took him out last week, because one of my moves last week was Chris Wood to João Pedro. Don't want to talk about it, but I left him in for this Ipswich game. If he were to blank last week and then get 12 this week, and if João Pedro were to get 12 last week and blank this week, then I'd be okay with the move. But chances are he won't, because he's playing Southampton. If I do Mbermo to Saka and Chris Wood out, I've got 4.2 in the bank. So I need to make another transfer somewhere else, and it would be possibly one of Smith Rowe or Rodgers, because at that point I'd have to. That's what I mean. I would have to rip up my team to get Saka in, which is why it's seeming so obvious to take Haaland out. But I'm not gonna take Haaland out and then not spend the money. And there's just a little, you know what I'm like with Erling Haaland. I'm still on him. His money's gone from 15.4 to 15.1. He's scored 2 goals since Gameweek 6. I'm pretty sure I've captained him 4 times in that period. and I am just his number one fan. But he's really starting to let me down, and it's going to get to the point where it's harming my season by blind faith in him. And if Man City are going to have a season where they totally tank the league and Haaland doesn't win the Golden Boot, at what point do I go, City aren't going to do well, I need to move off Erling Haaland. But the flip side of that is, if he goes on a run, which City have definitely been known to do in previous seasons, and he goes brace, brace, goal, hat-trick, brace, 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 then everybody that's already taken Haaland out and spread the money can't get him back.
Yeah.
I've now got a Golden Boot and treble winner under 50% owned, which is ridiculous.
Yeah. And
my rank will just go from strength to strength based purely on his performance, because I've covered other players. Unless, even if Saka and Haaland were to match their points over the next 4 or 5 game weeks, I would probably still have some very strong green arrows based on his returns.
Yeah. Plenty to think about. So it's rolling or João Pedro for you, is it, at the moment?
Yeah, João Pedro would be the move I'd make. Yeah, that would probably be the only move I'd make, would be Strand Larsen to João Pedro for free. I've got 0.6 in the bank, perfectly easy to get to him. And the other move on top of the Wood move would be Flecken down to Fabianski, which would give me the money. So if I did Wood to a 4.4/4.5 attacker and Flecken down to Fabianski, then I could do a Burmo to Saka. But I'm not going to do it for a hit. So, yeah, chances are I won't be getting Saka next week. But we'll see. But that's me. Roll. It seems like a lot of words, considering I'm just going to roll.
Yeah.
But what about you?
Well,
I'm hoping you're going to say the same.
Well, you know me.
The Tinker Man.
But yeah, so at the moment it's lining up Raya in goal, back 3, Gabriel, Collins, 8 Nuri. Midfield 5 of Salah, Palmer, Saka, and Burmo and Rogers, and Wissa and Isak up front. And Delap first on the bench for me, with Hall also with Hall second sub and Fast third sub with Fabianski the keeper. Yeah, 1 free transfer and either 0.8 to $1 million in the bank. That sort of figure. We spoke a lot about Jackson in this video, so I'm not going to go on and on about him again. But if I were to go along the lines of getting a second semi-premium forward, because there are lots of wildcard 12s, we're going with three forwards that were all under 7 million or like 6.5 million and under.
Yeah.
Going with 3 there and going heavy with the midfield. And it's partly differential having Isak in, either an Isak or Watkins or Jackson or Solanke, with then 2 cheaper ones, which at the moment the popular ones it's looking at as, you know, Cunha's overtaken the popularity from Wood. Really,
he's not that cheap anymore, though, is he?
No,
Cunha.
7, I think now. Cunha.
That would put me off buying him now.
Yeah, I think it's possibly a missed the boat. Plus, where I'm ranked, I'm thinking if I were to try to get Cunha, and then João Pedro. It's going to be one of the template front line. If you're not having Haaland, unless you're going really top heavy in the midfield, your front line's going to be João Pedro, Cunha, and Isak / Jackson /
Watkins /
Yeah,
Solanke.
yeah. That's what the front line will be. So
Yeah.
if I'm going to try to make up rank, it's thinking a little bit differently to try to make it up. Fixtures wise, Brentford are terrible. So my priority over the coming weeks is to get rid of my Brentford assets, 2 of them for sure. So Collins for 1 definitely, plus either Mbermo or Wissa, but possibly both. Because if I do go for Jackson over the coming weeks, the funds are most probably going to need to come from Mbermo. And
I certainly wouldn't be in a rush to transfer out Collins. I know what
pardon?
you're saying. I wouldn't necessarily be in a rush to transfer out Collins. But with Hall's fixtures, Aït-Nouri's fixtures, and Gabriel's fixtures, I would be happily playing that back 3 week in, week out for the next sort of 6 to 8 game weeks. And with Aït-Nouri's 4 yellow cards, to have a Collins to come off the bench, even if it's just for a 2, I wouldn't necessarily. Do you see what I'm saying? I wouldn't necessarily rush to get rid of Collins, but that was going back to what we were talking about, having 90-minute men. He's a nailed-on
Yeah,
starter for Brentford, isn't he?
yeah,
But if you're gonna make an attacking move with
yeah.
Mbermo,
Because the Collins one would, as you said, it would be fixture based, and because he's 4.5, the alternatives I were looking weren't really any massive downgrades to raise pennies.
no,
It would have been a sideways move to someone that's in around the 4.4 or 4.5
yeah,
or
like if you were to
possibly.
go Colwill or like Van Heck, they're obviously both on 3 yellow cards but got favourable fixtures, but
I was
it
looking at
wouldn't.
it was Concert and Dean, but then Dina's got 3, and there's the Matson issue which we spoke about last week.
Mm,
So yeah, the main financial swing to get Jackson is the Wissa and Mbermo combo, and Leicester at home, manager Leicester at home. I'm not taking either of those 2 out this week.
no, but that
So,
puts you in a position to roll for next week, and then you'll have 2 free transfers to change those 2 positions, wouldn't you?
and I might only do 1 that week because I've looked at potential plans and also taken into account fixtures. And with Semenyo getting his yellow and then being suspended for 13, he's got, I think, a tough fixture in game week 14. But that Mbermo slot my options for that spot might be going back to Semenyo for Bournemouth's run of fixtures. That's one option.
Yeah,
Another option I've looked at is Mitoma, because I
yeah,
thought if everyone under the sun's going on João Pedro, if I get Mitoma instead, so I make 1 less forward transfer and get Mitoma in instead. So that Mbermo slot's questionable, but it would be him down to somewhere. I think I looked at the budget and it would be a maximum 6.5 mil I'd have at the moment,
right.
in order to get Wissa up to Jackson.
Mm.
But then looking at the fixtures again, it was sort of possibly the Jackson in game week 16. But yeah, options are kept open. I've got my sort of players in mind, but it's saving transfers where possible.
Yeah, it's all about putting yourself in a position of strength. So if you roll this week and you've got 2 free transfers next week, and then at that point you want to make that move, you have the option to. If you
Does
make
the
a transfer this week of Collins to Colwill or Collins to Konza or whatever, next week you're stuck with 2 Brentford assets unless you're going to take a hit. And also the upside of doing that sideways move, there just isn't one. I
because
mean, looking at your team right now, that screams roll. There's nobody I'd change. I mean,
the
there's a case to be made for me to start Delap over Rodgers, but
that's
I get why you wouldn't do that. But I watched Delap against United, and that boy's gonna score goals.
The lineup on screen is based on what Fantasy Football Hub put down as the
Yeah,
because they've got down they're predicting 4 points for Rodgers, whereas
yeah,
the lap down for 3.7. But
yeah,
for for me, any change really, if I were to do a change this week, it would be possibly falling in the João Pedro trap. But the
yeah,
debate I've got is, would it be for Wissa or Delap? On one hand, I'd say bring him in for Wissa because Brentford fixtures are about to turn, and it would be a 0.4 million saving.
yeah.
But then looking at the team, I want to be able to bench Rodgers. So if I took out Wissa, João Pedro would come in for Wissa, but I'd still have Rodgers away at Chelsea, which then made me think, well, maybe I'd do Delap to João Pedro because Delap's away to Nottingham Forest. But then after the Nottingham Forest game, he's got 2 home fixtures. Well, I think Crystal Palace and Bournemouth.
They've got quite good fixtures coming up, Ipswich, I
So,
think.
which made me think, right, well, I don't especially like doing that. So that therefore screams, well, do I just bench Rodgers, play Delap, and hope that Forest's defence of the last 2 weeks doesn't stays as bad as it's been the last 2 weeks and doesn't go back to how tight it was before that?
Well, Ipswich can score against anyone. They're a good team. I know that they're a newly promoted side. I'm not suggesting they're great defensively either, but they can score goals. That's why Ipswich are doing far better than Southampton are, is because they can score goals, because they do have a good centre forward. He has scored 6 goals already this season, and that could have easily been 7 or 8 against United if he'd have just taken a few chances, or Onana didn't make. I think he made one very good save, but no, I mean your team just screams roll, Matt. Being perfectly honest, if you want my opinion on it, because again, if Aït-Nouri gets a yellow card, then that's great. You've got Lewis Hall, but then that means playing Collins next week, which you won't want to do. So you've got an option to make a change there. Or I mean, with injuries, if somebody gets injured and you've not wasted the transfer, because I agree, I don't think it would be a waste, but to take out Visser with Leicester at home for João Pedro, who's got Southampton at home, it just
They could match each
seems,
other.
it just seems like a real sideways move, and one that next week when there's a fire you need to put out, you'll really be like, I just really didn't need to make that move. And if I hadn't have made that move, it would have put me in a position where I can deal with a Aït-Nouri suspension or a Gabriel injury. But looks like we're both rolling this week.
Yeah. Well, we stick to that.
Well, I know I'm far more likely to stick to it than you are.
Well, and I think another thing which I'm trying to tell, based on the rank I'm at the moment, and with their fixtures turning, not many people are going to have Mbermo and Wissa and
No,
Brentford.
certainly not Visser.
And as Brentford are quite decent attacking, especially at home. If they can both get multiple attacking returns at home to Leicester, that coupled with the Arsenal double up in defence, if they can keep a clean sheet to West Ham, then those could do me wonders. It could be potentially a Brentford and Arsenal rescue at the weekend. But yeah, what are your
Let's hope
thoughts
so.
finally before we finish on captaincy for the weekend?
Somewhere,
Over the rainbow.
way up high. I think you. I'm a Chris Wood owner against Ipswich, and I'm thinking about it, but I think there are better options. You're a Saka owner, but I'm not entirely sure he's the best option. Isak is a good option. For me, though, it's between Haaland, Salah, and Palmer. The armband for my team's currently on Salah. I could try and be clever and go Haaland, and just hope that he does well. But it's now just too much of a risk, and I know everybody's going to say, "Why have you got a 15 million striker if it's a risk to captain him?" Like, I get that. But looking at the form right now, if I've got Salah, who has had double-digit hauls for fun, against Man City, who are shipping goals for fun, just threw away a 3-0 lead in the Champions League and what have you, then all fingers point to Salah. The Aston Villa versus Chelsea game, for me, is a bit of a lottery game. I couldn't tell you which way that's going to go. I couldn't. Does that make sense? I don't look at that fixture and think, "Oh, Chelsea will win that 3-0." So I don't know. But my top two would be Salah and then Palmer.
That from your team.
Yeah. I think, but again, there is that temptation to captain Haaland and hope that this week's the week and go against the crowd, and maybe Salah doesn't score and Haaland does, because that would help my rank. It definitely would help my rank.
This is where you'll think I might potentially be bonkers.
Is
And I don't, to be honest, think I'll have the bottle to go ahead and do it, because I do think the way Man City are shipping goals and the fact that it's at Anfield with Salah, the form he's on, I just think that's...
And its effective ownership will be through the roof.
Yeah. Palmer, yes, you got to take the weekend with a pinch of salt because Madueke couldn't get himself out of the way. But Palmer hasn't been returning consistently as Saka and Salah.
Which I said weeks ago, by the way, and I didn't listen to myself. He's had two double-digit, a 17 and a 25. But other than that, I think he's blanked in 7 games. And I don't know why I just didn't listen to that. Because he's not like Salah, and he's not like Saka, and he's not going to tick over with 8s and 9s and 10s and 12s.
And he's not like Palmer from last season.
No. And he's very much a 2, 6, 2, 17, 2, 3, 8, 25. Like, that's Palmer. Yeah. And trying to pick when those big hauls are coming is quite difficult.
But I was saying when going back to my captaincy about thinking outside the box, which I don't think I'll be brave enough to go to, is Wissa.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad call.
Because
I was listening to Let's Talk FPL earlier, and he was talking about Mbermo as the captain, and I don't think that's a bad decision based on Leicester being managerless and obviously not great.
and Burmo's playing wider since Wissa came back from injury.
Yeah.
So my reasoning why Wissa over and Burmo would be that, well, since he came back, he's got what, 4 goals or something in the last 2 home games, and
Yeah.
Burmo's got what, 1 assist
He
or something
definitely
like
likes
that in
home
that
game.
period.
I
So
just feel like you've just had another green arrow. Salah's effective ownership's going to be 150 odd percent.
don't blow it.
Just don't take the risk now.
Yeah,
Again, going to that busy fixture schedule. Take risks, but take calculated risks. Now's not the time to take risks, I don't think, during this busy period. Now's the time to play safe. Now's the time to roll your transfers where you can. Now's the time to captain the highest owned player in the game and the one that's had double digit haul after double digit haul. Now's
yeah,
just not the time of the season where you go, oh, I'm going to do a Vissa over a Salah. Because although the upside is massive, it's not worth the risk, in my opinion. The red arrow coming if Salah
mm,
gets a brace is bad news. Because if you've got Visser and not Cunha, and you captain Visser and he does well, and do you know what I mean? His point: if Cunha scores a brace and Visser scores a brace, great. But if Salah then goes and scores, oh, it's bad news.
yeah,
Or it's bad news. So I just wouldn't.
mm, yeah.
But we'll see. Tune in next week. We'll find out.
Will the veteran blow a gasket and
Take.
have the bottle and captain Wissa, or will he
You'll
play it
have to
safe?
do something. You'll have to do something. If you don't roll, you'll have to captain Collins or something.
Oh, well, there's a thought. Well,
Right.
yeah, we'll call it a wrap on there. I'll put the links up again. Yeah, I hope your teams and what our teams have helped you with your sorts of plans, so to
Yeah.
speak, moving forward for game week 13, where you can find
Roll where
us.
you can. Roll where you can.
Roll where you can.
Roll where you can.
Sorry, I was just feeling left out. Roll where you can. And keep
Could make
those,
that the caption.
what? Roll where you can.
Yeah, just roll where you can. Just make
And
it.
then have it rolling down the screen.
Just keep that. Just roll where you can. Every video from now until January is just gonna have roll where you can. Just going round and round and round all the video the whole time.
Those people watching, comment below whether you think that should be my end of line catchphrase for the winter month to finish on with roll where you can.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank you
if
for
you found the
watching.
video, sorry, mate.
No, I was just saying thank you for watching. Thank you everybody for listening to me ramble on. Roll where you can.
Yeah, if you like what we're chatting about, like our waffle, find our useful waffle that we probably end up keep repeating. Don't forget like and subscribe where you can as well. It would be very much appreciated and help spread the word about our channel. Find us on X, FPL Affairs, Facebook group, Fantasy Premier League FPL1, all lowercase, YouTube channel at FPL Affairs. Almost forgot then for a moment. The Spotify link is so complicated, just find it in the About Us description pages. But all that's going to be left, really, for me to say is good luck with game week 13. Hope you get
Yep.
green across the board.
Greens
And
everywhere.
yeah, and keep these final FPL affairs under wraps until after the deadline, and then completely
roll
reveal them.
and then roll where you can.
Oh yes, And as Jack says, roll where you can. That's your catchphrase, not mine. We'll have to do it.
Yeah, sorry.
I'll finish
Sorry.
with under wraps, and you can finish with roll where you can.
Roll where you
Sounds like a Christmas rapper. You're talking about rolling, and I'm talking about rapping.
can.
See you in the next video. Bye bye,
Thanks for
everybody.
watching.